Hello, everyone. I am Mariners Guy. It's probably what I'm going to call myself. I'm coming to you from my car in a parking lot because what better way to launch a new channel than from your car in a parking lot? What I plan on doing with this channel is talking about the Seattle Mariners baseball team. Lately, I've been really into a lot of MLB discussion YouTube channels like Giraffe Neck Mark or Fuzzy or even John Boy, and I always thought that would kind of be fun to do, but I don't know nearly enough as they do about MLB as a whole. But I do know a lot about the Mariners, and I really like talking about the Mariners. So, yeah, I would like this channel to sort of just be a Mariners discussion channel where we discuss, the latest news, rumors maybe, trades, etc., all that kind of stuff. Maybe looking back on some other players or seasons. But yeah, I just think I've seen a lot of discussion on their social media pages, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and I always kind of wanted to bring that sort of discussion here because, I feel like they are an underrated and underappreciated team, understandably so. We are the proud owners of the longest playoff drought in MLB, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the longest playoff drought in professional American sports, which is just disgusting. But for the first time in my life as a fan, I think the team has actual hope and promise. So yeah, I just kind of want to start discussions up. Just have a lot of fun talking about my favorite team, my favorite sport, and yeah, we'll see where that goes. A little bit about myself. I have been a Mariners fan since the year 2000, which would make me about 7 years old at the time. I got into the Mariners kind of mid-2000. That was the last season where we had Alex Rodriguez. But I didn't have my first full season as a fan until 2001, which was, as I'm sure most of you watching this know, was our fantastic 116 win season, first with Ichiro. We made it to the ALCS, and got just lambasted by the Yankees. Big shocker. So I ended up being kind of spoiled. I watched that season. I had so much fun with it, and my naive 8-year-old self was like, wow, the Mariners are supposed to be good. As I'm sure many of you know, that was foolish of me to think. Not that I really knew any better, but yeah, but that did introduce me, especially via my father and my brother, into the sport of baseball. And I ended up getting really into it, as into it as a kid could be, having all the baseball dreams, wanting to meet the players, get stuff signed. Every time I would go to a baseball game at Safeco Field, which is now T-Mobile Park, my dad would get me one of those programs, and I'd always keep them because they came with scorecards. And I would watch games on TV and do the scorecards with them, just kind of, fun baseball nerdy stuff. And so that was the extent that I was into it. And then around 2006, 2007 season, it was right around the time where we first called up Felix Hernandez. I kind of just fell out of not only the Mariners, but baseball in general. I hadn't really gotten into baseball as a whole at that point, because I was only really interested in the Mariners. I knew on a very basic level how baseball worked, but I was not a baseball geek or whatever you'd want to call it. I was just a little kid Mariners fan. But that was around the time where the Mariners had begun to play to what history expected them to play like again. So I just got really tired of not only constantly losing all the time, but, I'd get attached to this team, and then the following season, half of them would be gone, either via trades or free agency or what have you. And, when you're a kid who doesn't really know baseball, that's, boring. At that point, I didn't care. There was nothing to keep me attached to the sport. I loved the Mariners, but, as soon as I started to love a player, the player was gone. And, again, when you're a kid, all you want to do is win. You want to have the good times. So constantly losing also did not really help that. And I was also becoming an adolescent, becoming a teenager, moody, hated everything. And so baseball, slowly phased out of my life, I suppose is the best way to put it. And then around, I wasn't around, it was 2014. That was the season where we signed Robinson Cano. And I was going to be going off to Central Washington University, and I started to get into baseball again. And I will admit, right here and now, I was more so inclined originally because I heard they were doing relatively well. So my reintroduction to baseball, I suppose, was a bit of fair weather business. Because I definitely think I probably would have just waved it off if they were playing poorly again. But I don't really know what the exact trigger was, but I found myself watching baseball games again, getting interested in baseball. And at this point, I was 20 years old, so I got much more into baseball, the sport. Obviously I was into the Mariners more than anything, but baseball, the sport, started to capture my attention, and I started to learn a lot more in depth about the rules, strategies, what goes on, and it just sort of snowballed from there. And now here I am making a channel like this, after spending 8 years or something just not caring about the team or the sport. So yeah, it's that's kind of where I've been, and I'm gonna try to stay as unbiased as I can, because which it's very hard to do, as if you're a big old Mariners fan, I'm sure, because there's a lot of things that I think are going right, despite the fact that on paper they might seem like they're not going right. There's a few signings where it's like for instance, when we traded Gene Segura away, I wasn't very happy about that, because even though he was kind of a cancer in the clubhouse, he was still very, very good. And for a team like us that was just on the fringe, you want the good players, even if it comes at the cost of being a cancer in the clubhouse. But nowadays, I sort of understand that was probably the better move. Hindsight's 2020. You go, man. Hindsight's 2020. And J.P. Crawford, I'm a believer in J.P. Crawford, so I'm gonna try and approach things from a more neutral point of view if I can. And I'm sure most of you know pessimism is just rife in the Mariners fan base. A lot of Mariners fans seem to have that good old baseless belief that we are destined to fail literally always, no matter how good things go. And I get that to an extent. I don't think that's looking at it logically, obviously. But, when you're just so used to the disappointment, it's hard not to feel that way sometimes. So I definitely don't knock fans for feeling like that. But I'm going to try and sort of open some eyes to, how I think things really are, which I don't really know of a better way to put it, and I know that sounds real pretentious, but that's just kind of one of my objectives here. I want to talk about the Mariners. I want to bring attention to the Mariners. I want to stir up excitement for the Mariners because I'm excited, and I think we have a very bright future, and like I said, that's for the first time in my life as a Mariners fan, as a baseball fan. I shouldn't say the first time, the second time. Obviously, I had a lot of hope after the 2001 season, but that hope didn't come back until, last year, when they detailed our totally not a rebuild, but a step back plan, which it's a rebuild. Almost the entire team from 2 years ago is gone. But I think it actually has a chance for the first time ever of working out. And I just sort of want to, not to sound like a broken record, but I want to bring that to attention. I want to talk about it to people, is what I meant to say. And just sort of have a good time. Have a good time with Mariners fans, for Mariners fans, among Mariners fans. And, hopefully we can look back on these days after winning a World Series ring, or at the very least, making the frickin' playoffs, and say, hey, that was fun, even though everything reeked of despair, like always. But, my first video is probably either going to be a 2019 season in review, or maybe just sort of the off-season that we've had so far, maybe what I'd like to see, up to a reasonable expectation, because obviously signing Garrett Cole would be phenomenal, but it doesn't make sense, stuff like that. So, I guess we'll just see where things go. Until then, nice to meet you, and I hope to see you around.